How to maintain healed piercings. Coming up next on Body Piercing Basics, episode number 93. So you may want to stick around. For those that are new to the channel, my name is DaVo. I'm a professional body piercer and have been since 1994. I own and operate the Axiom Body Piercing Studio located here in Des Moines, Iowa, inside Skin Kitchen Tattoo. So when I talk to you about these things, I'm talking to a level of expertise that comes with being in the body piercing industry for well over 26 years. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about after you've healed out the piercing, after you've done all the work, after it's gotten to the point where you no longer have to clean it with the saline all the time, you're hassle-free, what should you consider, think about, and what should you do after the piercing is healed? Kind of maintaining that piercing and making sure that it stays healthy. One thing I want to talk about right off the bat is piercings kind of go through 3 stages during the healing process or what have you. They go through the first one, which is kind of that acceptance and recovery period, usually lasting on most piercings anywhere from a week to 2 weeks. Basically, during this period of time, your body just recovers from the trauma and also keeps that wound somewhat more sealed to avoid infection when it's acceptable to it, and starts that process of slowly accepting the jewelry and producing tissue around it. Normally during this period of time, you're going to see things like redness, discolorization, heat, tenderness to touch, inflammation, swelling, maybe some slight bleeding off and on. Most piercings, this lasts about 5 to 6 days. The second phase would be the actual healing and growth, the period of time that your body produces that tunnel of tissue around the jewelry. During this, it's an open wound. It is acceptable to infection. It needs additional care to make sure that it's taken care of. That's why we have you do the saline. That's why we have you practice all these things like not swimming and not letting people have oral contact with it, and keeping your environment clean, and etc., and avoiding abuse to the piercing. After that phase is done and you can stop cleaning it every single day, the piercing will do what we call seasoning or strengthening. And what happens is that tunnel of tissue is finished producing, and then your body produces layer upon layer of tissue around that jewelry. This will also cause that piercing hole to kind of loosen up a little bit. Often people don't really consider it healed at this point. And that's where the confusion comes. It can sometimes be a little tender. It can be acceptable to even changing the jewelry in some cases. And it's easy to damage because it's a very thin layer of tissue that's formed around that jewelry. Seasoning can last a couple years in some cases, to the point where it continues to strengthen and grow and kind of reproduce back from scar tissue into semi-normal tissue. Well, so now that we have that figured out, we're going to talk about kind of that seasoning period and after, kind of what leads up to it and what continues. Common thing that I get asked about a lot of times is, or there's a misconception that the piercing isn't healed because they see this discharge on it. Occasionally, periodically, it has a very distinct odor to it. And people think it's either an infection or it's actually still healing. What this is seburns in most cases, or sebums. S-E-B-U-M, sebums, I guess is how you pronounce that. And what that is a waxy, oily substance that your body produces to moisturize and protect your skin. Basically, it's what makes you waterproof. This can be produced and start to collect inside piercings. Usually it isn't even noticed until the jewelry is moved. It can have a very, very ugly, distinct odor to it. It can smell like death warmed over, or toe jam, or, if you ever stick your index finger in your belly button after you haven't cleaned it, which you should always clean it. Mom said so. And you smell it, and it smells foul, and it's kind of it's the same stuff. Now, this often mixes with dead skin cells, which just adds to it. So you move the jewelry a little bit, and then you see this chalky, cream cheese looking substance. And as humans, we generally try to get a little bit of it and then put it to our nose, and it smells terrible. You can eliminate this or kind of avoid this by just simply cleaning the jewelry with warm water and soap in the shower. Just slightly move the jewelry. If there's any discomfort with moving the jewelry, then don't move it. But generally, if you just keep clean, rinse it off well, do that a couple times a week, usually it doesn't produce issues. People will sometimes notice this more so in piercings that are close to the nose, especially septum piercings. Doing the same thing, or possibly if the piercing is seasoned enough, pulling the jewelry out for a short period of time and cleaning it with like a toothbrush and a little bit of antibacterial soap and warm water will usually remove that completely. It's not a negative thing. Your body's doing what it's supposed to do. It just smells gross. All right, with that out of the way, let's talk about how you should properly clean different types of jewelry. With metal jewelry, generally, and this is non-oral piercings. We'll get to oral piercings a little bit later. Metal jewelry, cleaning with warm water and soap, maybe a brush, is usually about all you have to do. You can usually do that with the jewelry in. Just do it during your normal shower routine. You can even use a washcloth if you need a little bit more texture, but usually just mild maintenance is going to be enough for it. Now, organic jewelry. When I'm saying by organic, I mean stone, wood, and fossilized and antlers. That stuff, you want to contact whoever manufactured it and ask them how they suggest cleaning them, especially larger plugs where you're going to probably have that sebum problem. Generally, they have to be taken out and soaked, and then they should be conditioned with some type of natural oil. If there's inlays or any additional thing there, you really want to contact whoever produced that or manufactured it and ask them directly, what do you suggest I do with that jewelry when I remove it and clean it, and how should I do that? Glass jewelry, pretty easy to clean. Just warm water and soap is more than enough. It's usually very hard, has a very hard surface, so usually isn't a problem. Plastic jewelries, first off, I don't suggest wearing for long periods of time. It has a whole load of issues that from the possibility of that breaking down inside your body and possibly being toxic because it's chemically based, to it being easy to scratch it, and then it causes damage even on a healed piercing when the jewelry shifts or moves or is taken in and out, to the fact that it deteriorates. The body kind of breaks it down. With plastic jewelry, if it's stinking or it's gross, just throw it away and get another piece of plastic if you insist on wearing plastic. Or invest in some decent jewelry and it should be fine. Now let's talk about oral piercings, tongue piercings, various different lip piercings, cheek piercings, all that fun oral stuff. That sounded kind of dirty. Anyway, often with oral jewelry, plaque will build up on the jewelry. This can be kind of gross, kind of uncomfortable, and can actually give you bad breath. Recently, I was discussing a smiley piercing with one of the viewers, and they had commented that they had theirs for a long period of time and had never noticed any issues with the swelling or etc. Her theory was that she removed the jewelry on a regular basis and cleaned off all the plaque. I think she said weekly or monthly. And that may be the reason why she hasn't seen those issues. Having that plaque is going to not only create kind of a rough surface that can agitate the piercing, but it probably isn't good to have inside of a piercing. I'd have to research it further, and I haven't, because it's really something that doesn't come up very often. But it's a good idea to remove the plaque, not only because it stinks and it's gross, but it looks really bad. The most common place that you'll see this collection is on the bottom ball of a tongue piercing. It will get to the point, as somebody who has to change them on a regular basis, they can get pretty gross, almost to the point where they've turned tan because it's collected so heavily. You can remove that in a couple of different ways. The first one being, of course, is just brushing the piercing jewelry on a regular basis when you do your normal daily oral routine of cleaning your teeth. Just running a little bit of toothpaste in a brush, diluted toothpaste, will usually get rid of that. Since sometimes that plaque and etc. and even food particles can kind of get in between the post and the ball, taking it out and soaking it in denture cleaner will usually break loose all that stuff, and then you just brush it off with a toothbrush. Also, just if you don't want to get denture stuff, just using a small amount of toothpaste and brushing well. Just make sure that if you use either of those, that you do, in fact, rinse them off well. Now, understand, oral piercings do close very rapidly. So it's a good idea to wait further in, or if you're going to remove the jewelry, kind of have an understanding of how much time you have to take that out before it's going to start closing or causing an issue. In some cases, it may be better just to buy a new piece, replace it, clean the other one, and have it as a spare. Okay, let's talk about abuse. We talk about it a lot during the healing process, but I don't think a lot of people mention it or talk about it after the fact. Here's the deal. You have a piercing on your body. Through that piercing is a hard piece of metal or glass or even plastic that is much durable than your natural organic tissue. Meaning, if that piercing gets caught, if that piercing has pressure, if it's twisted, pulled on, etc., or just not really good, there's a chance that it's going to cause some damage to the piercing. It could also just generally cause damage to any of the tissue around it. Because of that, just like if you hit your knee on the coffee table or your shin, and I know everybody cringed a little bit just thinking about that, it's going to take a couple of days for it to recover. I don't understand why people think that a healed piercing, when it's completely healed, it's okay to hang like 15-pound weights on it, pull on it, yank on it, etc. That isn't really a sign that it's healed. What that is it's mostly healed. But if you're pulling and yanking on it and it hurts a little bit, even after it heals, that doesn't necessarily mean that it isn't healed. That means you're damaging the piercing. You're hurting yourself on purpose, and there's no reason for it. For this reason, I would suggest avoiding contact with the piercing even after it heals. Avoid things like sleeping on it, any contact sports where it might get caught or snagged. The other thing you want to consider is the type of jewelry, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Whenever you notice that a piercing is sore or tender, especially after a day of sleep, when you get up in the morning and suddenly your ears hurt, this piercing you've had for 3 years or in some cases 20 years, give it some time. It's going to take time for it to recover and no longer be tender. And start thinking about how you sleep or what causes that trauma and try to eliminate it. Let's talk about jewelry selection, types, etc. Once it heals, some things you should think about when buying jewelry or replacing the jewelry. First thing is, it's best to leave the jewelry in at all times. Only removing the jewelry to clean it if you need to, and that's the last resort, or to replace the jewelry. Whenever possible, especially in that first year or so, it's a good idea to let your piercer actually change the jewelry the first few times. Pay attention. Ask them to show you what the proper way is to remove the end that's on there or what have you. Any hints they can give you. Whenever possible, sterilize the jewelry between wears. Now, when you change jewelry, regardless if you're the only person who's ever worn that piece of jewelry, there's always a possibility that when you push that jewelry in, that you cause a slight tear in that piercing tunnel. Then if you've had this piece of jewelry that's been sitting on a counter in your bathroom for the last 8 weeks, getting fecal matter and other airborne contaminants on it, is what you use to insert there, there's a possibility of transferring those contaminants into the piercing that is now an open wound. Then this healed piercing is suddenly infected. Another way, so it's always a good idea to at least, and I'll get into storage here in a second, but it's always a good idea if you can and you're able have your piercer sterilize it. They could put it in some people will charge for it, some people don't, and it does take a little bit of time to do it, but they'll do it in a pouch. And once in that pouch, as long as the pouch isn't broken or 10 years go by and it deteriorates, it's going to be sterile to the moment that you open it and break the seal. Avoid wearing jewelry daily that has sharp edges, points, or things that hang off of it. Anything that's going to get caught on something is going to get caught on something. Certain jewelry, special occasion kind of situation might be okay. If you're going to, you're wearing that special dress that shows off your midriff that you're so proud of, and your navel piercing, maybe hanging something that has those shooting star nonsense stuff at the bottom might be okay for one night. But for every single day where it's going to constantly get caught on pants, bedding, towels, and everything else it comes in contact with, it's not a good idea. Those things really aren't designed for long-term wear or long-term use. The next thing is avoid heavy jewelry that is extremely heavy in weight. It can put a lot of pressure on the piercing, and it can cause the area between the piercing and the surface of your skin to begin to thin. This is really common with really heavy ear piercings. The area below will become very thin, or it'll thin out even the tissue above it. So always take that into account when you're purchasing jewelry or deciding to put jewelry in a piercing. Weight does matter, especially when it's through softer tissue, like, for example, genital piercings, earlobes, eyebrows, stuff where weight does make a difference. Avoid drastic changes in the shape or style of the jewelry. This is a really common one with nostril piercings. You've been a very good person. You have taken care of that navel or nostril piercing. You kept the jewelry in. You did everything right. It heals perfect. Then you go out, you buy the smallest, tiniest, itty-bitty little ring and put it in there. And you change the shape of the piercing from straight to this drastic curve. Then suddenly you have bumps and all kinds of other problems. That drastic change is trying to force that tissue into a new shape. It doesn't do well. You may, after you've had the piercing for maybe an additional anywhere from 6 months to a year, it may tolerate that smaller diameter, but right after it heals, you're going to have issues. So avoid just going from one extreme to another. Take that into consideration. It'd be just like trying to keep your ear folded in half with a rubber band. It isn't going to feel good, and it's going to cause some issues. The next thing is, if you put in new jewelry and you suddenly notice that you're having issues with it, you may be having a reaction to the material otherwise. I would suggest, like example that I just gave with the nostril piercing and switching out to the ring, that if you suddenly see problems, you need to go back to that original jewelry that you healed it with and see if that solves the problem before going into the spinning downward spiral of 800 home remedies from the internet. Try changing the jewelry back first. Next one, if the jewelry is threaded or threadless, make sure that the ends are secured on a regular basis. You should check your jewelry no matter how long you've had it, no matter how great the quality is. You should check that those ends are secured probably on a weekly basis. It never fails. The 1 week you don't check it, that's when it comes unscrewed and falls into some spot that's really gross, and that piece of jewelry that you spent the extra money on and invested in because you wanted to have it for the rest of your life is now in that little spot behind the toilet that never gets cleaned properly. Next thing is, make sure that you always buy quality jewelry that is certified, meaning some kind of third party has certified is biocompatible. Even though the piercing is healed, if you have any type of metal sensitivities, it can cause issues even in a healed piercing if you put in something that you're allergic to or isn't of a higher grade or has a bad finish. Invest in jewelry. If it looks like it's too good of a deal to be true, it probably is, especially if you're buying like 5 pieces of jewelry for $2. That is garbage. That is trash. Don't put it in your body. Next one, always store jewelry in an airtight container or bag. Also, or you only want one piece of jewelry per bag or per container. The reason for this is that jewelry, especially if you're like most people and you don't have like foam inserts keeping them stationary, every time you move that box, every time you shake that bag, that jewelry's banging against each other. This could damage it. It could cause scratches. It could cause problems. Then you put the jewelry in, and it's suddenly dislodging the piercing tunnel. Also, lastly, one other thing, because I think I forgot about it. Let's get that out of the way first. When changing jewelry, it's always a good idea to use a water-based lubricant that doesn't have any additives. The reason for that is it reduces the amount of stress and force of that jewelry going through, so it makes it glide into the piercing opposed to just kind of forcing it in there. If you ever feel like you're forcing a piece of jewelry in, you should stop, step back, and possibly put the other piece of jewelry back in, because the gauge or thickness of the jewelry may be incorrect or the shape may be incorrect. So in other words, see your piercer and ask them. Now the last one. Do not wear sterling or silver jewelry, especially in areas of the body that are prone to silver poisoning. Any area of your body that has a mucous membrane is going to be acceptable to silver poisoning. For those that are unaware of what that is, it is a permanent darkening or tattooing around the area, kind of a blackish gray. This is really common with people that wear sterling jewelry in nostrils, because that tissue tends to absorb it. It's permanent. The only way to get rid of it is to have it surgically cut out. You can also have this problem in things like nipple piercings and genitalia, where the tissue is more absorbent. The best way to avoid it, though, is don't wear silver jewelry. The other thing is consider that a lot of the things that hang off of jewelry and a lot of the things that are shaped cool, also a lot of the nipple shields are made of sterling. Always make sure that you know that everything that's attached to that piece of jewelry is made out of that material. It's really easy for them to kind of cut costs by putting something that's substandard on the jewelry instead of a biocompatible material. Well, that's all I have to say on that subject today. If you enjoyed this, found it interesting, found it edifying, found it useful, give me a thumbs up. Let me know that you liked it. I like it when you like it. If you haven't subscribed, why the hell not? Hit the subscription and then punch that notification bell so that you're notified every single time we post something. If you like merch, you like t-shirts, you like fanny packs, you like tote bags, you like throw pillows, you like beach towels, we've got them. About 12 to 13 different designs, various different colors. There's a merch bar below. Also check out the link in the description and find something there for yourself or someone on your holiday list. Till next time, here's hoping all your piercings heal with ease and without a single issue. And if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area, hope to see for your body piercing needs in the future. Have a good day, everybody. Take care of yourself. Take care of one another. Wash your goddamn hands. Wear that mask when needed. Social distance. And be safe. And if you're watching this after all that, good job, everybody. We got through it.